And the hilarity already ensues. Even as I hit record, there was shit going down. We probably will not put into this podcast. So, hey, bienvenidos, amigos, amigas, benvenuti, as I say in Italiano. Welcome, 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 dudes, dudettes, players, playerettes, and everybody in between. Welcome to Game of Crimes. We're doing it again. We're doing a different format this time. In fact, what we got is we're going to bring in some of our guests a little earlier than we normally do, as you guys have been seeing what we're doing. And then, to make that work, one of the things I probably ought to do, Murph, is I probably ought to have the template up. I've got our small town police blotter stories ready, but I need to have the template up because at my age, I can't remember shit. But I do remember one thing. We got the Sarge on with us. So before we get in too far, we'll just say real quickly, hello to Sarge Patrick.
O'Donnell.
And a fine Irish name. O'Connell.
Hey.
Did I say O'Connell or O'Donnell?
It
should be O'Donnell, but
it's okay. O'Connell now. Your name has been changed.
My mom won't be happy, but yeah, sure, it's O'Donnell. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on here, brother. Thank you for joining us. This was a very short notice thing too. It's been wanting to get you on here for a while, and it just kind of worked out for this week.
Yeah, it did. And again, you say that now, but just wait till this thing is over. So, we'll see if you thank us here at the end. So, hey guys, what we're going to do is let me just do some quick housekeeping because now that I have the script up, that's what it says. So, hey, just head on over to Apple and Spotify, hit those 5 stars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or as they say in Farsi, yekto se chirhar pan. That is 5.
They don't say that in Farsi. They say, don't talk it shit.
Yeah. So you can do that. Or ichini san nido if you want to do it in Japanese. So head on over, hit those 5 stars for us. Also head on over to our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. And if you think we're going to be putting up some books, well, when we talk to this next guy, when we talk to the Sarge, we're going to be talking about some books. This is going to be a little bit different episode than what we did, but it's going to be spot on in terms of what we always address. So head on over there. Also follow us on that thing they call the social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Hey, but Patrick, I know where you got to be. You got to be on this podcast, but Murph knows where else everybody has to be. So Murph, where do they got to be? Where do they got to be? One more time. Where do you got to be?
You got to come on over on Patreon. Check us out over there. Game of Crimes. See what we've got. We've got content that you might get a little taste of it in December. We're thinking about just maybe throwing some stuff out there to see what you think about it. But stuff that's serious, stuff that's funny. We have at the highest level, we have a monthly live stream. We've got an episode called "You Can't Make This Shit Up." 199. What's your emergency? We have Q&A.
Murph, please. People will be dialing. He said that one time, Sergeant Patrick. He said we were talking one time. And he goes, "Yeah, we got to do this thing called 199. No, 911. That's why nobody ever showed up to your house to put your fire out, Murph. You kept calling the wrong number."
Yeah, but that's the kind of fun we have there. I mean, you guys know we're going to have some fun no matter what we're doing here. So just come over and check us out.
Yeah, and the way you check us out is go to patreon.com/gameofcrimes. That's patreon.com/gameofcrimes. Here's how to order, as Billy Mays used to say. So just head on over there and have some fun. And if you just feel like doing a quick pause for the cause, hit paypal.com. Use our email, gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com or paypal.me/gameofcrimes. Whatever, it makes it easier for you to support the show and help us bring you more exciting content. But remember, folks, this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. We take the story seriously, but Murph, what's the rule?
But you know it already. We never take ourselves serious.
And so, Patrick, to show you how we don't take ourselves seriously, we need to tell you what time it is. Murph, what time it is?
You know what time it is? It's time for Small Town Police Blotter.
Yay! So, Sarge, you get to come in with this. I think this is one of your cases you may have cracked. So, this happened in Clawson. I have no idea where. A concerned neighbor living in an apartment along Maple Road, just west of Livernois Road, called police after hearing what she thought was a domestic violence issue. The neighbor, police said, thought she could hear a female yelling, "Stop," and "No," and possible hitting. Police arrived and learned that the boyfriend...
I know where this is going.
Wasn't
I know where this is going.
Wasn't beating her. He just wouldn't stop farting. And the girlfriend kept yelling at him to stop. Police cleared the scene expeditiously, according to the paper.
Call in hazmat. That's
was
not where I thought it was going.
Well, I didn't read the headline, though. No, I know what you guys are thinking, you dirty old bastards.
Yep.
Farting boyfriend causes neighbors to call police. That was the headline. If I read that, it would have taken the punchline away.
Oh, man.
No, but here, Murph, this next story is right up your alley, though. I guarantee you.
Is it Florida?
Now, this involves a deputy, though. This involves law enforcement. So, April 3rd in Park Falls, a 911 call reporting a subject who was masturbating in the bar. A Park Falls officer was dispatched. A deputy assisted.
They don't get paid enough for that.
I guess it depends on what city you're in. Well, hey, it's a community service option.
Redefines happy ending. Oh my God, there we go.
Whoa, that wasn't a Kansas thing, was it?
No, that definitely, that's probably a West Virginia thing. Maybe a Wisconsin thing. We're going to have to talk about Wisconsin here in a minute. Okay, so last story here. So this one is in the news. Nathan Wayne Pugh, he's 49. He's a bank robber who tried to rob a Dallas bank. And you know how they caught him?
Yeah, he's an idiot.
Well, yeah, he's an idiot. Guess what? The teller at the bank, she was pretty smart. She said, I can't give you money unless I get 2 forms of ID. So he gave her 2 forms of ID, and now he's doing 8 years in prison.
Well, if I may, we had a guy come back the next day after he robbed the bank. He wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't, he just goes to the teller, hey, give me all your money. She did. He disappeared. The next day, the same exact time, high noon, he comes back and the teller's like, holy shit, that's the guy who robbed us yesterday. And all my same cops, I was working, and it's like, yeah, we got a call, same guy's back. And it's like, okay, he just had a seat in the lobby and just sat there. And we're like, what's going on? And he just puts his arms out. Yeah, you can cuff me. He got $6,000. He didn't get the mother load. Yeah. He owed $6,000. Well, I think it was like $5,000 to the dope man. He owed his drug dealer $5,000. He says, he's going to kill my family. I didn't have a choice. And he said, I gave the rest to them. Take me to jail. All righty. That's the low-hanging fruit. There we
go. Thus endeth the reading for today, then. P.A.S. Domine Daneis Requiem. All right. There you go. See, we add color. We thought this would be a good idea. We just bring the guests in instead of doing just a separate intro. And now we subject Sergeant Patrick O'Donnell, which should have been O'Connell if you'd been like, Robin was. Wasn't Robin's last name O'Connell? Or what was his name? The actor who played him in the modern one. Can't think of it.
I think it was O'Donnell, actually.
O'Donnell? Oh, maybe.
All the cool guys are O'Donnell, just so you know.
There you go.
Well, and IRA guys too. So I know that from my friends, New Scotland Yard.
I don't judge.
So as I said, thus endeth the reading for today. Murph popped out momentarily. I think he was dying laughing, either that or he had to go pass gas and didn't want to do it on the podcast.
Well, that one thing, Pat, so you said, I think I spit all over my screen here laughing. I had to clean up.
But that's what I heard from somebody. You've reached that point, when you've been married long enough when you can actually fart in front of your wife.
Or like my oldest son did, he convinced her that he was going to, I'm not sure they were married at this point, but they were in the bed together and said something, and she covered her head up the covers, and then he pinned her down and let her rip.
That's what we call a Dutch oven.
Dutch oven. Yeah, that's when you're very comfortable with your relationship, you can Dutch oven your partner. Yes, that's lovely.
I got Dutch ovened as a rookie in Salina, Kansas. I'm riding with one of the senior officers, and he was what we called a public safety officer. So they would roam. One would roam the north half of town, another one would roam the south half, and then cover across all the beats. And we're driving down the road one day, and he just decides, "Hey, watch this!" And it was these old Ford, because they had the Ford station wagons. They had the Ford LTDs, but because they had extra gear in the back and everything, almost looked like an Adam 12 thing. Anyway, we're going Mike Marshall. If you're listening, this is about you. He ended up becoming deputy chief. Who knew? We're driving down the road, and all of a sudden he just locks, because they used to have the child lock on there. So he locked the windows, and then he just farted big time. And I'm like dying. I can't open the door because we're going like 60 miles an hour, and I can't roll down the window. So it just basically gassed me.
We had guys, I tell you what, back in the 70s, we had a couple sergeants. They would eat boiled eggs, and they would put sulfur powder on them. I mean, it first stinks to start with when you eat a boiled egg, but you put sulfur powder on it, it'll just curl your hair, make it fall out, make your eyes water.
Hey, before we get too far into the farts, I forgot, we got to mention one thing. If you guys want to join our Game of Crimes fans page, and Sandy's going to kill us for this, you guys just go to Facebook and type in Game of Crimes fans. Sandy Salvato, our favorite mafia queen, she will determine if you are worthy of entry. Basically, if you got a heartbeat and you can answer, even get close to answering a couple questions, we're going to let you in the super secret group that discusses things behind the scenes that only super secret fans of Game of Crimes gets. So if you want to see what's going on, just go to Facebook, type in Game of Crimes fans, answer a couple questions, and if you're worthy, Sandy Salvato will deem you worthy of entry and let you in. And
we're not going to tell the day that we're recording this, but happy birthday to Sandy. Today's her birthday.
Yeah, we don't want to disclose personally identifiable information. So
she's the queen.
Like my sister did to me. I was just telling Patrick this too. I'm pretty paranoid about not putting any of my personal information out there. And what does my sister do? Goes onto the group and says, "Happy birthday, Market." And she's listening right now. So, hey, well, let's kick this.
I got to meet her. She sat in on one of the sessions we were recording.
Yep, she did. That was one of the things she wanted to do. So she came out. She fully retired, so she decided to come out and visit. So I said, "Hey, come on in and sit down," and she did. And she's never forgiven me. So, well, let's get started. And as we do with everybody, so we've got ourselves a fine Irishman, Patrick O'Donnell. I thought it was O'Connell because I was just thinking too fast. I knew it was right there in the notes, but I said O'Connell. But it is O'Donnell for at least this show. So, Patrick, as we do with everybody, you're up in Wisconsin, or you used to be in Wisconsin, but tell us, how did you get started in this thing of ours we call Cosa Nostra? How did you did you lose a bet, drunk one night, wake up in a prison cell and decided I'd rather be a cop than a prisoner? I mean, how did this start for you?
I think it was, I went to college.
You think you went to college? You don't remember?
I
think I went to college. I might have joined the Army too. I just don't remember.
Those were very foggy years, let me tell you. Yeah, my academic career was not sterling, to say the best. I worked full time and I went to college full time when I was a youngster, and I got kicked out of college twice actually. But that's UW Whitewater, University of Wisconsin Whitewater. So I started out as a music major. I was going to be a high school band director.
Same here.
Really?
Yeah, I got a bachelor's in music education from Fort Hays State University.
Wow. It must be something with police and music. I don't know, but I guess. But I switched majors over to sociology, and my minor was criminal justice. I did a internship with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department back in 86, I think it was, or 87. And that changed everything. It was like, oh my God, this is more fun than I've ever had.
No, that was it for me. Somebody said, "Why'd you go into police work?" I said, "Because it was easier to arrest the little shits than it was to teach them."
Well, now this is the oh my God part, because now you've got Morgan looking for something.
Oh boy.
And he's probably going to sing a song or play a skin flute. I don't know what he's going to do here. Holy cow.
No, I found it. So this, and Patrick can see it, but you see, I don't know if you can see my ring. See the ring there?
I see the ring.
Has a treble clef on there.
Wow.
That is my ring. That is my ring from college.
So what instrument did you
all the low brass, baritone, trombone, tuba,
okay.
but I played French horn and trumpet as well too, but banjo, piano, guitar. So
banjo, wow!
Still have a banjo. Every time Murph makes me play dueling banjos, and he sits around and he goes, "You got a purty mouth, boy."
Maybe I do, and maybe I do.
So what I did was I did finish school, got my degree. They did not have criminal justice as a major back then. Not many colleges did. So sociology was close enough. And minor was criminal justice. And I just started doing the shotgun approach of trying different departments. And I took the test for the city of Milwaukee when I was 26. And it took 4 years to get on. That was back when everybody wanted to be a cop. I took the written test. There was 2,500 people in this hall. So yeah, it was tough.
But we want to know why you got kicked out of college twice.
Dude, you can't gloss over stuff like that. So did any of this getting kicked out prevent you from getting that job for those 4 years?
No, not at all. Well, like I said, I was working full time. I was going to school most of the time full time.
What were you working? You said you were working. What kind of work were you doing?
I worked in grocery stores since the time I was 16 to the time I graduated from college. I wound up being a night manager at a Piggly Wiggly.
I haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah.
That and then you got Wawa's and the Buc-ee's and all of these other little
yeah, I was the night manager at the Pig, and I also wanted to have fun. I was a young man and I wanted to go out and have a good time, and that thing called studying and books and all that took a backseat to work and the fun stuff. So Yeah, but I did wind up graduating. I didn't do anything too crazy to,
So
as far as that
you
goes.
were on academic probation, or
Oh yeah, I was a couple of times.
yeah, I
So
might have
so
done that.
so were all the guys on Animal House too. They were on. Were you on double secret
Double
probation too?
Maybe I was, but that's a secret. I can't say.
So, if you want to, a shameless plug for Game of Crimes, we just got through reviewing, based on popular vote, the movie Dirty Harry in our Narcometer, and the mayor of the town. Steve knew it too. We looked at it. He was Dean Wormer in Animal House. We're
Yep.
going. I can't take the guy
Yes, that's
seriously after
right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow, that's right.
yeah. So, a lot of good stuff. So, but so when you got on, how big population wise? How big was Milwaukee?
600,000.
Okay, so that was a good size. That's obviously the largest city in Wisconsin.
Correct. It's Milwaukee, then the second largest, I think, is Madison, then Racine and Kenosha.
Well, so since you're a music guy, you'll know this too. I've always hung out with all the guys who did drum and bugle corps and stuff. And I believe there was a famous one from Wisconsin called the Madison Scouts that always did
Oh
drum and
yeah,
bugle corps.
they do really well.
Yeah,
That's a high speed drum and bugle corps. Absolutely.
they're very good. See, Murph's feeling left out because he doesn't have anything to contribute to this part of the conversation.
Oh, so y'all just finish. Let me know when you finish talking about music.
I'll pull out the banjo and you can go back to saying, "You got a purty mouth there, boy. Squeal like a pig for me."
I got
Obviously,
some place for
references
this
to
banjo.
yeah. I'll go get the banjo. Okay. So, but when you first got, so you got hired in '86.
No. I did an internship with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department. I was still in college.
Okay.
I didn't get on the job till 95. I took all the tests and everything when I was 26, got on the list, and I didn't get on till I was 30.
Wow.
So you
Yeah.
haven't been retired from law enforcement too long then, huh?
No, I've been retired for 2 years. I did my 25 and I got out.
Well, I don't know. We talked to a couple people in your department. They said they thought you retired like 15 years ago. So
Some might say that. Yeah. Some of my bosses some of my recruits, who knows? I would not doubt that.
yeah, we used to joke, a couple of our guys. He says, "Yeah, he's about to be indicted for theft. He's been stealing paychecks for the last 2 years." Well, let's talk about getting on the police department, though. I mean, did you think it was going to happen, or did you go apply other places? Were you going to leave, or why? What kept you in Milwaukee, Wisconsin? Why didn't you go to another state or another jurisdiction?
I wanted to stay in state, and I didn't want to be a little podunk cop. I didn't want to work in a small department.
You mean like Bluefield, West Virginia, or something?
35 guys. Kick your ass.
Nothing against smaller departments, okay? Don't everybody hate. But I wanted to, like any young person, you want to go where the action is. You want to go out and have some fun. And I think I got bit with the bug when I interned with the sheriff's department in Milwaukee. And I'm like, man, you guys have nothing but fun here. This is just nonstop action. So I'm like, well, yeah, that's where I want to go. But I mean, while I was waiting, I worked as a car salesperson for 4 years. I bartended. I managed a 24-hour restaurant when I got out of college.
Which one?
IHOP.
Yeah. Well, gosh, you know what? That's okay. You would have had my ultimate respect if you had said Waffle House.
There you go.
We don't have Waffle Houses in
What?
Wisconsin. No.
But you know what we're talking about, right?
Oh yeah, I do. I do.
Best
But
work
I'll
release
tell you this
program.
much: 25 years of being working in the inner city in Milwaukee, I got into more fights in 1 year working at IHOP on graveyard shift.
Because look, couple of my complaints came from people at IHOP, drunks that, hey, what are you doing in my car? Dude, you've passed out. You left your door open. I mean,
It got so bad I had to hire a bouncer at IHOP.
Whoa. Now
that's when, you
that's a
got
tough
street
IHOP.
cred.
Yeah.
What do you do? I'm a bouncer. Where? IHOP. Ooh.
I'd also make him bust tables, but hey, his label, his title was bouncer. He liked that.
Holy cow. That's tough
Man, so
now.
that prepared you well for your job.
Well, what it did was I got good at talking to people, because after your first couple of fights, you're like, okay, that kind of sucked. And, you're always going to get nicked or whatever. And if I could avoid the fight all day long, I wanted to. And then I sold cars for 4 years. Well, now I'm talking you into something that you don't want to do, because nobody wants to really, part with their hard-earned cash. Because tell you what, a car is the second biggest purchase you're probably going to make. Your house is number one. Then a car is probably the
No,
second
I
biggest.
think an ex-wife is like number 2. Then
Ooh,
comes
I've
the
got one
car.
of those. I've got one of those.
Don't we all?
Oh yeah, but yeah. So I traded her in, but that's another story. But
Now,
but
did you trade her? Did you try updating your software? Did you try installing Girlfriend 2.0
yeah.
on top of Wife 1.0?
Uh-oh. That
You know
might
what
be
that happens?
TMI.
Girlfriend Wife 1.0 then accesses all your bank accounts and drains them as Girlfriend 2.0 is updating. So just let you
Yes.
know.
Mm-mm. You sound like
Yeah.
you've been there, Morgan.
Say again?
You sound like you've been down that road.
No, I saw that joke one time. I thought it was really good.
but selling cars, you know what? You're talking people into doing something that they don't want to do. No different than being a cop. Hey, you know what? I'm going to take you to this really small jail cell where you'll have no freedom. You won't even have shoelaces or a belt, and you're going to love me. And most of the time, you know what? It worked. I had people thanking me as I was putting the handcuffs on.
That's how you know you've done a good job then.
Yep.
Thank you for doing this, Officer O'Connell. I know it's O'Donnell, but I'm drunk, so I'm going to call you O'Connell.
Well, I had somebody, I'm with my cops. I was a sergeant. I arrested somebody and it's like, man, that Sergeant O'Donnell is great. And so, of course, it spread like wildfire. Hey, Sergeant O'Donnell, how are you doing over there? And I'm like, oh,
It
okay,
tastes like
that's
French,
nice.
O'Donnell. You know,
It's like that Saturday night skit where the guy comes in as a student teacher and he's calling roll because he's been in an inner city school and he calls for Palaki. Is
Yeah.
Blake.
Yeah, Palaki. Yeah.
yeah. No, I think I know which one you were talking about. So,
Yes.
but real quickly, if we just go backwards a little bit, when you went through the academy, how many people were in your class?
There was only 42. Usually there's 60, but for some reason, I got hired because of the crime bill. We got a ton of federal money. We got federal grants. Thank you, Bill Clinton. I'm not his biggest fan, but I got hired because of him. We had 4 academy classes go through in 1 year, which is unheard of for our organization.
So when you went through, how many officers did that give the Milwaukee PD?
There was 42 of us.
No, I mean,
Oh, okay.
what, you had no officers and they had to wait till the class graduated?
There's a lot of pressure on us. A lot of pressure. Ooh, you guys are our hope.
The turnover in Milwaukee is terrible. We're down to no officers, but don't worry, folks. The public is safe.
No, it should be 2,000. When I went through the academy, it was at about 1,800, and I think they're down to like 1,400 now. It's terrible.
So you go through. So as we ask most people, it seems like you might have had. I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna say you might have had an issue in the academy.
An issue? I had no issues in the academy. I love the academy.
I didn't say an issue. I said an issue. You said issues. So was there more than one? Did you get any trouble? I mean, you sound like a guy who probably pulls a joke or two or provokes some things.
Actually, you know what? I was pretty vanilla because I was 30 years old. I was one of the oldest guys in that academy. Most of these people that were in the academy were like 21, 22 years old. And here I am 30, and there was only one other guy older than me. He was like in his early 40s. He was the old man. He was a parking checker for like 15 years. He was like the parking enforcement guy that drove around in a Jeep and wrote out parking tickets. So the instructors really didn't key in on me because I was old. I was 30 years old.
So we were just fixing a real quick glitch here. But as Patrick mentioned, police dog, the dog he's dog sitting decided to be a dog and jumped up on his lap and started molesting him. And he was saying, "Stop!" No, we thought the dog was attacking him, but no, he was just farting, like in our story.
Oh, that's rough.
Oh, Frankie.
Right. Hey, so you were talking about you were the second oldest guy in your class. The oldest guy was like a parking enforcer, but that's why you said you were kind of. I can see why you were probably chilling class and not because you were there to get through it, right? I mean, it's not like you were young anymore. You'd had your fun, but like you're now like ready. Hey, let's get this academy over with. I want to get on the job.
Oh, absolutely. We were living in Madison at the time, which is a little over an hour away. And for the first couple of months, I was commuting, going back and forth.
On a daily basis, or did they keep you there during the week?
No, it was Monday through Friday. And I would go home in the evening. It was 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. So, I had to be up at dark 30 to make sure there was no traffic problems. And then I'd get home probably around 6 o'clock at night.
And then on top of that, what about studying and, prepping?
Yep, you had to do it.
Had all that stuff, huh?
Oh yeah, it sucked. That part I did not like. Then I wound up sleeping on a friend's couch. I wound up couch surfing, and he had this small attic apartment, and I'm on this couch, and he literally went out boozing every night. And I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he was getting home at 2:30 in the morning. Every morning he was up and then it was a small apartment. He would always make a pizza or microwave something, so he'd wake me up. And I'm like, okay, this is miserable. This is beyond misery. I'm too old for this shit.
Yeah.
So thankfully, we found a house in Milwaukee, when I was about halfway through the academy. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to graduate, even though they threaten you all the time that, you're not going to. But I was old enough to kind of see the games that they were playing. And I'm like, yeah, we need to move. So we moved, and then life was a lot better once I had my own house, and the commute was a half an hour.
So how long's your academy?
6 months.
Oh, okay. And then when you got done, so what's the process of getting you out onto the mean streets of Milwaukee?
What happens is you get assigned to a district station, you go to patrol, and you do 6 weeks of field training with a field training officer. And then you do another 6 weeks with a different field training officer, and they try to change the shifts, the people, but you're in the same district. I started out working midnight to 8 on graveyards, and then I went to early power, which was 11 in the morning till 7 in the evening.
So what was your favorite shift?
Oh, favorite shift. I liked late shift because of the people. There were some really good cops, very high speed, just hard chargers. And they were just, you could learn a ton from them. And, you guys know what it's like. It's the front row seat to the craziest shit on planet Earth. And when you were working 11 in the morning till 7 p.m., I mean, you'd still have homicides and crazy stuff go on, but just not at the volume that you do at night. So I enjoyed working late. When later on I promoted to sergeant, I did 4 years on late power, which was 7 at night till 3 in the morning. And that was by far my favorite. Then I got divorced and I had to go day shift so I could get custody, joint custody with my kids.
That's when I was in uniform. I worked a 7 to 3, and that was 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. and that was the best shift.
I would have retired off of that if I could have.
Of course, I was a lot younger then too.
Yeah, and the other thing too is it's kind of weird too, because after a while most everything was designed to be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, like banks, and other stuff like that. So you kind of have to, people don't realize when you do this thing called law enforcement, thing of ours, you got to just adjust your daily habits or your routines and stuff. Because there was, for me, as you've shared with you guys, there's no such thing. It's weekends off all the time. Well, let's plan something for the weekend. I'm not off,
See, that's the good thing about late shift. If you have kids, you could deprive yourself of sleep and still make the soccer game, still make the band concert. I did a ton of chaperoning for my kids when they were little, for field trips. And I was like one of the only dads that was doing it. And I'll never forget it. I thought it was great.
How did your kids like having you there?
They didn't give me too much guff. I mean, I remember one time we went into how can I put it delicately, not such a great neighborhood. And it was their Spanish field trip, their Spanish class field trip. And, they go to a bakery in a certain part of town, then a restaurant in a certain part of town. And I worked in that part of town. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm seeing everything. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning, but there's 2 prostitutes on the corner of where we're at. Then there's a kid driving by in a stolen car. I'm seeing everything through cop eyes, and all these dads and moms are looking like, oh, this is such a nice area. And I'm like, we're tripping over hypodermic needles. It's not that nice.
So let's talk about, I don't want to get into it yet, but I want to talk about, at some point, we're going to talk about this thing you do, Cops and Writers. You've got a podcast. We were just talking to you just got a pretty healthy book deal. When did the writing bug start for you? Was that while you were on the job, halfway through your job? When did this thing start? We'll get into it later, but I just kind of want to plant the flag. At what point during your career should we start looking for this?
When I went day shift, when I was going through my divorce, I had to go day shift. Like I said before, so I could have my kids, 50-50. And I told you before that I sold cars for a living for 4 years. Well, for years and years and years, when somebody would buy a car, like a friend or family, they brought me along with them. And it's like, hey, help us out. Then finally, somebody's like, why don't you write a book about that? And I'm like, you know what? I think I will. So, I mean, it's a glorified PDF. It's nothing spectacular, but I threw it up on Amazon myself. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. And then I went through the bad divorce. So I wrote a book about divorce from a guy's point of view, from the dad's point of view.
Now, did you write it from a dad's or a cop's dad point of view?
Well, it couldn't help but have the cop influence, and actually, the my biggest audience for that was females, were women. I thought I didn't do my market research, I guess is the best way to put it. And guys don't read books a lot. Women read a lot more books than men do, a lot more. And when it comes to self-help stuff like that, it's definitely more women. So my audience was women that they kind of want to see what the enemy was up to. So
That's a nice way to put it.
that's what I was doing. So I did that, and then a fellow sergeant, a friend of mine, was working on his PhD, and he wrote a post-apocalyptic book. We were talking about self-publishing, and I'm like, I could do that too. So I started doing that, and then I started the Cops and Writers Facebook group, and there was a lot of clamor for, hey, we want a police procedural for writers. So that's how that started.
Hey, so quick question about that. You talked about, you said writing for the enemy. Women are not the enemy now, Patrick.
I never said
You
that. You're
said
putting words
writing,
in my
they
mouth.
wanted to see what the enemy was doing.
Oh, there you go.
Well, see, you're twisting
No,
my
no.
words. You're twisting my words.
That's what
Stop
what you
twisting.
wanted to say, and I'm just helping you get. No, so when they wanted to see what did you get comments back though saying, "Gee," I mean, did it provide any insight, or were they more just interested in what did the guys think? I mean, did it help in any way? Was it? I assume it was like cathartic for you, but did it help women? Did you get any feedback that hey, it stopped? We were going to get divorced, but now I understand anything like that?
I didn't have any like life-changing stories, but I did have some feedback. I had some parts of this where it's like, okay, this is the best way to tell your kids you're going to get divorced. Some best practices. There's nothing. I tried to keep it as least toxic as possible. It's like, oh, I hate my ex. There's none of that. I didn't want that. That doesn't do anybody any good. It's just like, okay, you're gonna get divorced. This is happening. How do you lead the best life possible for your children? And you do this as amicably as possible. I mean, there's all different degrees of divorce. Some are, fighting tooth and nail, and some are like, I have a buddy that him and his wife got divorced. They used the same attorney. They went out to lunch after the court date. They just knew that they could not be together. They had a kid together, and they're still raising her just fantastically. They were the model of, and she wasn't a vulture and went after his pension.
Wow, that sounds like a fiction book.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, that didn't happen to me. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Well, let's go back into the law enforcement stuff because that's why I wanted to kind of plant this flag right now so we can bring it around later because the books are going to become obviously an important thing. But when did you start this Cops and Writers group? Was that while you were still on the job, like it was halfway through your career? About what point into your career did this all start?
It was towards the end. Cops and Writers have been around for a couple of years. No, oh gosh, more than that, probably 4 years. I started it when I saw the end was near. And a lot of people, in law enforcement, as you guys can attest to, seeing friends and colleagues, it's like they retire and they just kind of wander around aimlessly.
They become the greeter at Walmart. Hey,
and if that's your thing, knock yourself out.
Hey, but you know what? I had some guys say that's all they were going to do for a while because you know what? You can't take your work home with you. Nobody really calls you in on your days off. It's just, hey, how you doing? And it's a great way to decompress for a while till you figure out what you want to do.
Right. And again, it's like, okay, what do I want to do when I grow up? So I started writing, and I was very immersed into these writing communities. I started speaking at conferences. I spoke at one of my old lieutenants is a professor at one of the local colleges, so I went and spoke to his class, doing things like that. I mean, it's fun to ride motorcycles and smoke cigars and talk to your buddies, but that can only take you so far. I'm 58
That
years
doesn't
old.
put much money in the bank account.
Exactly. And we could circle back to the ex-wife, getting some of your pension. It's kind of necessity too.
Yeah, when your income drops precipitously, you've got to figure out another, as they say in the business, revenue stream. How do I monetize this hobby of mine, and turn it into something?
Yeah.
Hey, well, let's go back though into your career, because I wanted to start doing that, like I said, so we could bring it forward a little bit later. But as you're going through, did it strike you in your mind as you were working the mean streets of Milwaukee? I mean, like say during your first 5 years, that these were going to be stories you were going to do something with later, or is it more just hey, this we have to get together, drink a beer, have a choir practice, and we tell stories? Did this writing thing at all even remotely factor into your mind back then?
Not at all. It just my first week on the job, I'm working midnight to 8 with my FTO, and
Don't tell me you had
we got a
a
call.
naked guy on meth hop in through your car.
No, we
Oh
got
darn!
called for a stabbing at 7 o'clock in the morning, and my FTO looks at me and says, "Who's stabbing people at 7 in the morning? This is nuts." So they give a description of dude that did the stabbing, and we pull up. We had a patrol wagon. We were in the wagon, and sure as shit, here comes dude with knife in his hand, covered in blood, running like straight at me.
No shit.
I've got less than a week on the job on the street, so I draw down on him. I'm like, holy shit, I'm gonna have to smoke this guy, and I haven't even been out for like a couple days.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, well, that was a quick career, but I think he could sense that I was probably more scared than him. My eyes were like saucers, and he actually dropped the knife, fell down onto his stomach, and let my partner hook him up. And my FTO looked at me and says, "Just so you know, this isn't usually how it works.
Yeah.
Usually they're running the other direction when they see the police car." He said, or yeah, he said, whatever. But sure enough, we hook him up. We go there. Dude's got 2 IVs in him, and the paramedics are pumping the bags. They're like, okay, that's a bad sign. So they get him to the hospital. Long story short, he dies after he crashes 3 times. The doctor does open heart massage, and I'm standing at this guy's feet in the trauma room. So I'm like, oh, that's what the lungs look like. Oh, that's what the heart looks like. Okay, this is kind of cool. So he's pumping away. I get home and I'm like, this is the best job ever. Is this every day? Man, they pay me for this? Wow.
Well, it was that command presence you had when you jumped out of the car, and he's like, "Oh shit, there's Mr. O'Connell. I guess I better give it up."
Mr. O'Donnell, Steve O'Donnell.
199, brother, 199.
I knew it. I was just messing with him. You did it because you forgot already.
I'm looking at his name on the screen.
Well, the reason I said that is because we had another guy on our podcast. It was actually a friend of Murph, but I got the recommendation from a friend. What's the largest LSD factory, basically lab in the U.S., and it was in a missile silo. And Guy Hargraves said, "Yeah, I started on Dallas PD," and then blah blah. He started to gloss over it. We said, "Wait a minute, back up." Come to find out, like his first week on the job, he's out there. A naked guy on meth hops through his patrol car. It's like we were just going to pass all this. No, the good stories are there. So before we go too much blah 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 and we gloss over stuff, let's talk about like maybe one of the weirdest calls you had in Milwaukee.
Well, that was one of them. That was a little bit different. This was after Jeffrey Dahmer. I got on 95 and Dahmer was like 92, 93, somewhere in that ballpark. So everybody was thinking, every house I went into, I checked the refrigerator. I'll tell you that much. It's like if we were searching anything, the first place I go to is the refrigerator, thinking if a head was going to pop out at me or not.
Jeez.
But as far as strange calls go, I mean, working in a big city anywhere at night, it's just which one is crazier than the other. I've been to decapitations. I've been to, any kind of murder you can think of, suicides.
Decapitation murder?
No, it was a traffic accident, that one. But we found a suicide note, so he actually killed himself. And he was on a little Honda, like CR something or other. It was a real low to the ground, and there was a full size Ford Bronco. and his face went right into the bumper.
Jeez.
He was going. The crash reconstruction people said he was going over 100. And the Bronco was stationary. It was parked.
Man, oh man.
So his head was in the
bad
back.
Stuff like, as a trooper, I can tell you work bad stuff like that, because that's why you see a lot. If you guys will look on the back of a lot of the truck, tractor, semi-trailers, the semi-trailers now are supposed to have that bar to prevent the underride collisions. And that's one of the reasons the federal DOT and the Interstate Commerce Commission, they came out with this stuff just because of stuff like that. The cars would rear end trucks, but there was nothing to stop them from going under that far. And that's what you would get, is you'd get the head injuries or the decapitations.
The probably one of the bigger ones was I went to a triple homicide. I was off probation. I'm with a senior officer, and there's a bar shooting. We were inside with an arrest like right out of the bat, and we're waiting to get our report signed, and we could hear our fellow officers saying, "Hey, this is bad." You could hear the gunfire in the background. It's like, well, we need to get going. So eventually we hauled ass down there. And as we were getting there was 4 cops going up a gangway behind the bar, and one guy almost got his head blown off. By the grace of God, he sees like half of the dude coming from behind the building. He's like, "Let me see your hands, let me see your hands." So the guy shows him his left hand. He didn't know he had a 357 in the other hand. So he walks up, and bad guy starts popping rounds. He dives. The guy who was on point dives onto the ground, and the bullet hits where his head was.
Wow.
So then another bullet hits the brick building next to it. It fragments. It's either the brick or the fragmented bullet strikes a officer like 2 down from. They had like a little train going, blows her glasses up. She starts pounding rounds downrange. And all this is going on as we're running inside the bar. We run inside the bar, and I almost trip over a dead body that was on the curb. My partner didn't see it. So we got the dead body there. This shooting's going on outside. There's shooting in the back of the room. And me and my partner are going in there, and there's a dead guy laying on the ground, still with his Budweiser in his hand.
Well, priorities. And
then I go around to clear the bar. Behind the bar, there's a bartender. He's like in the fetal position, and he's got a couple of holes in his head. He's way dead. And I've never seen that many casings ever in my life. I thought it was like on a beach with like shells. It was way over 100 casings.
Wow.
So we're like, oh shit, there's 2 cops that were by the dartboard, and they're back to back, kind of like the Charlie's Angels freaking pose. And they were froze. They were completely frozen. So we're like, well, we got to clear this place. So my partner and I cleared the entire bar, just found blood trails and casings. And I mean, for a little bit there, we're like, well, holy shit, what's next? So, and of course, half of it was dark, blah, blah, blah. So we get done with all that. The guy who was shooting at the cops, he ran out of bullets. He was trying to go over a fence. One guy that we used to call Swede, he was this big Marine guy that was like 6'3", 250 pounds.
Was that the same guy who played in Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood?
Yeah. How did you know?
Sweet.
Buddy. Sweet. That's my. I used to do a drinking game to that. Not to sidetrack too much, but oh my god! Whenever somebody would say Marine, Gunny, Highway, or fuck, you had to drink. If we made it to Grenada, we were doing good. I'll tell you that much. But anyways, back to the story. Yeah, Swede grabbed him and pile drived him into the ground and broke his collarbone. But he didn't know that he was armed. He didn't know. It was like a half block down. And the gun popped out of his waistband when he pile drived him.
Wow.
So now we're getting all the posse together. Everyone's taking a breath. And the dispatcher's like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we got a call for a sniper in the building next to you guys. So we all had to posse up and go up on the roof of the house, of the building next to us.
Was it? Was there a sniper there?
Nope.
So what was the motive for all the shootings?
Underage kids that were like 19, 20 years old. They came in there like 15 minutes before bar time. They wanted to be served. And the bartender's like, even if you were legal, I'm not going to serve you. So I'm getting ready to close. Okay, we'll be back. They went back. They had Mac 10s.
I was about to ask
Uzis.
what it had to be something like that. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. They sprayed the shit out of that place. And you know
were they in a gang or what?
Yeah, they were gangsters. Yeah. And the sad part about it was the guy with the Budweiser, he was a working class Joe that happened to live in a bad neighborhood that was just stopping in for a beer before he went home. And a bartender, he's not making millions of dollars. And then this other person, he was just a patron. That's what fries my ass when it comes to, it's like, well, criminal justice reform and all that. And I'm like, I'm not saying everything's perfect, but with all these people doing podcasts and shows, with all these reformed criminals, they never ever have a victim of a crime anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Except Game of Crimes, episode 60. We brought, I'll tell you, one of the most impactful episodes we did was a victim of human trafficking. She was kidnapped.
Oh,
Natasha Herzog.
Yeah. I heard that.
Kidnapped
Yep.
right off the steps. And that's why I said you don't get an appreciation for. And I'll tell you what, that episode alone changed actually a little paradigm shift for me about how I view women that were involved in prostitution or some of the other stuff. Because once you listen to her and you realize that some of these women that are in adult films or stuff like that, you go back and look at their background. Many of them were victimized in such a bad way because now that's the only life they knew. Just terrible. I mean, yeah, you're right. So that was my beef with some of these podcasts is that they want to profit off the misery of others, but yet they don't want to really tell the victim story. Who's the victim here? We had Christy Schiller on, who does Canine for Cops. Her story about the way she got attacked, nearly killed herself. I mean, and the other thing though too, the other victims we talked to a lot of cops who have been shot at and wounded. And been seriously injured in the line of fire. These folks are victims too. And until you hear their stories, you don't get a feeling for what it takes to do the job.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Just looking into the eyes of a real victim of a crime, because, when you work in the inner city anywhere, a lot of it is one criminal doing something bad to another criminal. And it's kind of hard to feel bad for him. But every now and then we'd stumble across a real victim of a crime, and it's like your heart goes out to them.
Yeah.
It's terrible. They're changed forever.
Financially, they can't get out of their circumstances there, and they're just stuck.
Hey, let's circle back for a second. Let's not leave the bar shooting too soon. So, what was the follow up from that? So, because they're gangsters and stuff, you obviously caught them later. So, what's the rest of the story there?
The rest of the story was, that was all night. And then when we were there, the local hospital called and said, hey, we got a call for a gunshot victim. Maybe it has something to do with you guys. It's like, all right. So my partner and I boogie on down to the hospital, and the guy's being a complete asshole. One of his buddies shot him in the ass.
Friendly fire.
Yeah, so of course he looked like Superman laying down on the cot with his arms. And it's like, so he wouldn't give the hospital what his name was. He was just being an uncooperative asshole. So
that's why he got shot in the ass.
Well, I told the detective he got shot in the brains.
Fortunately, they didn't hit anything. They took an X-ray of his head, and nothing was there.
That's right.
That's funny.
So what happened was a lot of follow-up. Being in patrol, I guess it depends on how you look at it. It's like, okay, that was just one night. On to the next. The detective bureau would be saddled with solving said crime, the homicide bureau. And they did, but it took a while because it was connecting the dots with all these different gangsters. And they found out who it was.
Was it a homegrown gang or a national gang? What kind of gang was it?
I think they were GD, Gangster Disciples. So
that's out of Chicago, wasn't it?
Yeah, they started in Chicago. That's kind of like the
Crips
LA version of the Crips. Yeah. Yep. Same difference.
Unbelievable.
Same idiots.
Yeah.
But we did that, and there was a giant choir practice after that, because you have all these guys and gals in blue uniform pants and crusty white T-shirts back then. And we had like tabletop things. The sergeants were there, and all the cops, and it's like, okay, this pitcher of beer is the bar. These pieces of popcorn are the cops going up the gangway. Everyone's reliving it, and it just, it was hilarious. Oh my gosh, that was so much fun.
But you've got to have those decompression times like that, because the crap you see out there on a daily basis, you got to have a way to release that crap.
Hey Murph, who did we just talk to that was involved or was working the same time Dahmer happened? Remember, because they said, weren't they working? They were working in an adjoining district, and the ones who had contact with Dahmer, they sent him back. Who was that?
Was it Tim Stommel?
Does that name ring a bell? Tim Stommel?
It does not.
We got to go back and think about it. He made. Oh gosh, it's just hitting me now because we just recorded Tim. One of the folks we just talked to was, I don't know if they were Milwaukee people, but we were talking about the Dahmer case, just like you said. You said it happened in 95, so you're checking that. They were working at the time it happened, and they talked about how the morale took a hit, and how, it was maybe it wasn't Milwaukee. Trying to think who it was, but no, it had to be, because they were talking about how you were just going call to call to call, and so when you've got somebody that looks like they're old enough, it's like they've got a responsible adult. It's like you had homicides and rapes, and assaults going on, and it's like we've got one drunk person. I got to think of who that is, man.
I think it was Tim, because I think he was. Then he started as a cop up north somewhere. He grew up in a small town, and they went to a big city and got on as a police officer, and then eventually joined DEA. In his episode, for our listeners, his episode hasn't come out yet. It won't be out for a couple more weeks.
So he was a Milwaukee cop for a while, then went to the DEA?
I can't remember if he was Milwaukee or...
You know what I'm going to do? Through the magic of Al Gore's amazing internet, see, I bring up... yes, it was. Tim Stommel was You know why you didn't know him? Because he was only on Milwaukee from February of 90 to February of 93 before he went to Coral Springs. He left 2 years before you started. He was working the night in an adjoining district when they found the first body with Dahmer.
Ah, well, I interviewed Annie Schwartz, who was the reporter that broke the story. You guys should interview her. She's great. She is fabulous. And she wrote a book called Monster.
They just turned that into a series on Netflix, right, or something?
Yeah, she had something to do with it, but the Netflix series is not based on fact. Yeah, I know that's hard to believe that Hollywood actually do something like that.
Are you telling me Narcos isn't based on fact?
No, it's all true. It's all true. If you like it, it's all true. If you don't like it, it's all Hollywood.
Well, I do like it, so that means you did throw somebody out of a helicopter.
I was just disturbed by the cat. Don't tell your cats about what happened to the cat.
Actually, Murph, believe it or not, I was going to tell you about that too. Got a message on Facebook Messenger this morning. One of the people off the fan page, they were listening. They go, "I just want to know, is it true about the cat?" I said, "No, it was not true about the cat. Cat died of natural causes. Was not feloniously wiped out." So,
nope. No, but one thing we all did learn is that Hollywood will never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Well, hey, let's talk about that for a minute. Even though it happened a couple years after, what was the effect of Dahmer and the investigation and finding out all of this stuff? How did that translate into anything that affected you when you got on?
Yes. I got on 95, and I think Dahmer was 92?
93, I think. So
93?
Yeah.
93 maybe? So, like I said before, I met the cops and the detectives that dealt with Dahmer, and the one thing that really popped out was the two cops that got fired had no due process. Zero. It was all, it's like, oh my God, this is terrible. Boom, you're fired. Well, obviously, they sued, got their jobs back with back pay and a huge settlement, which they deserved. It's like there is a certain process. You can't just blanketly start firing people. And this chief just, oh boy, I've got to do this because the mayor is telling me I have to do this. So if you were in any kind of trouble, they made sure that they were following the rules. Internal Affairs is doing everything by the numbers because it's like, look what happened here. So that did have some backlash. It was
91. I was just pulling that up too. So he was apprehended November 20 in 1991. So from 78 to 91. But yeah, because that's the other thing too is, if you had to go back and do it again, it's kind of like, look, I'm from the Midwest. And a lot of times you don't want to think bad things like that happen in the Midwest. And we thought that too until we had Dennis Rader and BTK, till you have people like Jeffrey Dahmer and stuff. But let's talk about that for a second. Like the shift that these were guys working in the district. I mean, it just being so busy. on some of those nights, I mean, you're just like call to call to call to call. There is no stopping to have, hey, let's have a nice 30-minute, code seven or a lunch break or whatever else. It's like you're lucky if you feel like one of those Amazon drivers that has to pee in a bottle, to keep delivering packages.
No, when I first started, midnight to 8, it wasn't uncommon to be 30, 40, 50 hitches in the hole, which means it's 30, 40, 50 assignments that you're behind. And obviously it's by priority. So the barking dog call can wait because you just got the shooting, et cetera. So the dispatcher was always looking to, we called it banging you. Hey, the dispatcher's banging you. You gotta, you gotta go. You gotta go. It's like even something that is, how can I put it, very stressful for a cop that you would like to decompress. There's no time. And it's like, on to the next.
And you
On to
don't
the
get any
next.
time to process stuff. You've been in a bad scene, you got a kid killed, or you got a messy domestic violence.
Doesn't
It's
matter.
like you say, you're on to the
Nope.
next thing.
Yes, absolutely. But, as far as the Dahmer stuff goes, I know the two detectives that interrogated him. And back then the rooms were they were glorified broom closets, more or less. And it was Pat Kennedy and Michael Dubas that were the two detectives. Pat Kennedy was this gigantic, just big guy who could just talk a mile a minute. And Mike Dubas was a very polished, very intelligent detective. They were both in homicide. And they're locked in with him for like 12, 16 hours for a couple of days interviewing this guy. And later on, if one of these guys had an interrogation or interview for something that I'd bring in, I would listen outside the door because I'm like, man, these guys are good. You know what I mean? So I remember I brought a guy in for homicide, and Kennedy walks in, and I handcuff the guy to the wall. They had like a big brass ring and a table and chairs. And Kennedy goes in there, throws him his keys, and says, "Get that handcuff off your wrist. Come on, we need to talk about this." And I'm just like, in 5 minutes, he had this guy just spilling his guts. There was no yelling, there was no screaming, there was and just, man,
Well,
he was just
speaking
that
of
good.
writing fiction and stuff, people write fiction or you watch it on TV a lot of times. They think the best way to get a confession out of somebody is to yell and scream at them, like, son, you're going to get the needle. You're going to die. Tell me what happens. Well, wait a minute, Skippy. If I tell you what happens, I'm going to get the needle and still die, right? So why are you yelling and
Mhm.
screaming at me?
Well, one of my favorite, I think it was Chicago PD or Hawaii Five O. These are shows that my wife likes. And there's a female detective interrogating this guy, and he's handcuffed behind his back and this sitting in a chair, and she's shoving this gun and her gun in this guy's mouth. And first off, you never go in there armed, when you do an interview.
Right.
And second of all, I'm like, he can't talk. I'm like yelling at the TV, he can't talk. You have his gun in his mouth. It's like, there's a Glock in the poor man's mouth. Come on now.
I think he just said he did it.
Yeah, he just did it. That's what I heard. What'd you hear?
I heard a gurgle.
I got to tell you though. I mean, this is we had a philosophical discussion with one of my friends one night because we talked about you see some of the stuff on TV. What would you do? And it's kind of what would you do if? And the question was, what would you do if you walked in and somebody was doing that exact same thing? That was the scenario. If they had a gun in somebody's mouth, who's a suspect in a crime, whatever, but they're obviously not armed, they've been searched, and you got a gun in their mouth, what are you going to do? And this might sound cold and callous. I said, I'd fucking arrest him. And I'll tell you why. I mean, it's like we cut a lot of slack to cops to do stuff, but if I walk in and you got a gun in somebody's mouth, they do it on TV. That's the kind of shit that gun goes off. Somebody dies. He gets a hold of it, turns it back around on you, kills a partner. Now, I say I'd probably arrest him, but I mean, it'd be one of those things. I sure as hell would take his gun away from him, bitch slap him, and then get some lieutenant or somebody. But it's like Hollywood, I think, does a disservice. And I'll tell you, was my rant here. Sorry, I'm off on a rant. People see stuff like that and they think that's the way police work is really done.
Yeah.
They believe what they see on TV.
Right. Well, it's no different than when DNA and all the science are really kicking off, and you had the CSI effect.
Oh, you mean I can't get
Mhm.
DNA back in 2 hours and every case has DNA, and if you don't have it, obviously the guy's innocent. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And we obviously our interview rooms, everything is recorded, video and audio. And we have DAs now that it's like, well, they didn't give a full confession on tape. I'm not going to charge this.
Have you ever met a DA that said they had enough evidence? They always want more, don't they?
But Patrick, you bring up a good point though too. Things have changed because I was in a homicide trial one time, and I happen to know the defense attorney. Who, by the way, speaking of ex-wives, he ended up being my attorney in my divorce. I said, "You're good. I want you for me now." But we were on there, and he was going because I just got through testifying. He goes, "Do you have any evidence?" And I looked at him. I said, "I thought my testimony was evidence." And the judge says, "That's right." But there was a time to where your testimony, your observations, what you heard them say, that was evidence. And we have come to that point where it's like, you don't have DNA, you don't have fingerprints, you don't have it on tape. It's like it didn't happen.
Yeah, I had an AUSA in I think it was in Miami, Southern District of Florida, that told me one time the best evidence you can bring me is video, second best is audio, third best is an agent's testimony. I'm like, well, screw you too, pal. But you know what? When it's on video, it's kind of hard to dispute, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Well, so let's kind of tie off on this because I want to get into some of your book stuff because you've got some very interesting things there. When you went through the academy, was this any kind of a case study, or did they walk you guys through it, or talk about the need to look? You can't just take what's at face value. You need to drill down. Was there anything that came out of that you were trained on specifically, or was it more just anecdotal stuff you heard on the job?
It's on the job. In the academy, that was kind of taboo. They didn't talk about it at all. It's kind of like the Dahmer elephant in the room, really.
Yeah.
The fallout from that was incredible because one of the prosecutors wound up he quit being a prosecutor. He was so shook from the trial that he became a Jesuit priest.
Wow.
Then Pat Kennedy, he stayed on the job for a couple of years.
That was one of the detectives, you said?
Yeah, that's the one that flings his keys at the guy who just killed somebody. He's just excellent detective. He's the one him and Dubas are the ones who interrogated Dahmer, and he joined the Peace Corps.
Really?
Yeah, I mean that whole trial, the whole case, it really affected a lot of people, but they didn't talk a whole lot about it.
You get stuff like that, and it's almost like the greatest generation in World War II. My dad was a World War II vet, Vietnam, didn't talk about it. You get a lot of people from that time, they don't talk about it. We had, I think it was episode 13 might have been, Dave Reichert. He was the lead investigator for the Green River Killers, Gary Ridgway. 49 homicides, I think, and then another 3 on top of that. Even to this day, he ended up being sheriff of King County, ended up being a 6-term congressman, member of Congress. And even when I think he was 72 when we interviewed him, emotionally, he started crying on some of these things when he thought about the victim and the impact that it had. I mean, it deeply affected him. He stayed on the job, but he went into a different position. But to your point, it affected him so deeply that 30 years later, 40 years later, it brings tears to his eyes.
Wow.
That's the reason we want to bring the law enforcement on here, just to give ourselves a shameless plug here. But it's for you guys to tell your stories, not for us to read a book about it and tell your story. We want our listeners to hear firsthand what you went through out there, because those that aren't in the law enforcement or military profession never see things like that you were seeing on a daily basis.
Well, I interviewed 2 police psychologists on my podcast, and they called them paper cuts.
Like Death of 1,000 Cuts.
Like, okay, yes, and then something like Dahmer hits, and it's like now you got the machete coming at you. It's not like a little paper cut. Now, on top of all the paper cuts, then you go through something huge like that. Where do you go from there?
Well, how did that change? Even though they didn't talk about it in the academy, which they probably should have, but on the job or even with the training and stuff, did it change how you guys? I mean, did some of your training officers talk about that specifically? Hey, look, here's why we need to go further on this or do this because of Dahmer. Was there any kind of downstream effect that you saw in your training?
Not really. Just the jokes is like, yeah, you better check that refrigerator. You never know what's going to pop out of there. Just stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like policy, procedure, SOP, nothing like that. No.
But so he was arrested then, and I know that he was, appeal was denied because he was killed in prison. So, which wasn't because we're talking about, this was through 1991, and so he got killed the year before you got on. I think, you got on in 95, you said, right?
Yes, yeah, 95.
I guess what was the public's reaction to that? Even when you started on, was there still reactions to it? Was there still a memory of it? Or they had a long memory about it. Was what kind of impact did it have in the policing? Did it affect you at all when you came on, or was it still there?
A little bit, but kind of what happened with the city of Milwaukee was it kind of stole its innocence. Where before, what Milwaukee was Laverne and Shirley,
Yeah.
Happy Days,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And then Dahmer came along. Now, when you hear Milwaukee, and it's like, oh yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer.
And what was the beer company they were a part of? Hassan Shots
Shots,
Beer.
Shots.
Hassan
Yeah,
Pfeffer,
Shots beer.
Schmiel, Shamal, Hassan Pfeffer Incorporated.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, but it kind of stole the innocence from the city. It's like, okay, now we have this monster roaming around. It just, yeah, just it tarnished the image for a while. But as far as the general public, they have short memories. There's always a new crisis. There's always something new to bitch about for the cops did this wrong or that wrong or whatever the case may be. There's always something new and shocking to come along, and there always was.
It's just like 911. It galvanized our country. Solidified us into one country again. But how long did that last? Not long at all.
Yeah. In fact, I remember too, Jeb Bush, when he was governor of Florida, Murph, you'll find this out too, but he said, we've got people down here that have developed amnesia. They were getting their third hurricane and nobody was taking it seriously. It's like, yeah, maybe we'll prepare, maybe we won't. And that's the thing. After a while, it's either so much you get amnesia about it, or you get desensitized to it. So let me ask you, who was the author again of the book you were talking about, you interviewed?
Annie Schwartz.
When you talked with her, and by the way, let's give a shameless plug. Give a shameless plug for your podcast because we've talked about it. So tell us what it is, where we can find it.
Cops and Writers, and that's on all your major platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I think I'm on like 15, 16 different
See, now
platforms.
For Murph, you got to be careful. You mean writers, like WRITERS, not writers, RIDERS, because he'll be looking for cops and writers, and it'll be some equestrian unit he'll find.
But let me tell you, Patrick only has the best guests on his show. The very best.
Well, that's debatable. You used to have standards till I heard one episode.
Javier Pinion. What's his partner's name?
So how long you been doing Cops and Writers?
Well, like I said before, I got the writing bug when
I should have been more clear. The podcast. How long you been doing the podcast?
I think it'll be close to 2 years in February.
And how many episodes are you up to?
93.
So you do so you just basically do one a week? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I do a weekly.
Well, let's talk about that for a little bit too. So let's talk about the Cops and Writers, because we'll find a couple of things about your career to talk about. You say like you're closing out. What made you pick the writing part of it? I mean, was it simply because you'd written that glorified PDF you said, and then you wrote the...
Yeah. I kind of got the bug. I'm like, hey, what I liked about it, I had these visions of being on a beach somewhere typing away. Okay, I'm going to retire. I'm going to move to Florida, and I'm just going to write on a beach somewhere,
Well, hold on a second. I got to poke a hole in your little balloon here, because one of the things people hate more than anything after all those years in law enforcement is fucking writing reports. Half the time you got and now you spend all your time bitching about having to write reports, and now you're telling me, oh, I got the writing bug. Well, where was the writing bug when you were having to write reports?
All right, I was a sergeant for 17 years.
So you didn't write shit.
I wrote the important reports. I was the one who had to do the use of force, when a cop had to, discharge their weapon, their OC, use their baton, squad accidents, complaints, Joe Q. Citizen or Joan Q. Citizen would come to the district saying, officer did blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. That's the stuff that I was doing. I had the best job ever. I'll be the first one to say it. Being a street sergeant was the best job. No, hands down.
Nice.
All day long.
And here you're dreaming of going and sitting on a beach in Florida, and look at you now. You're sitting in Boston.
Babysitting a dog.
Yeah, she's a good dog, aren't you, Frankie?
Yeah. So, but your dreams now, you're sitting on, but you're still in Milwaukee, right?
I am still in Milwaukee, probably for the next year to 2 years. Then we're going to move
to where?
Hopefully Florida.
Well,
West Coast.
Come on down, brother.
West Coast.
Come on down. Yeah, well, he said West Coast, Murph. He doesn't want to be anywhere near you. So you're going to be up there in the Panhandle, or what are you talking about?
No, I like Naples. Naples, Fort Myers,
I'm
Bonita
glad you
Beach.
clarified that for a minute. I thought you said I like nipples. I'm going, what?
Well, it probably does that too. But
your guys' heads. Get out of the gutter, boys. Jeez,
I
Louise.
wasn't the one that was going the wrong place with the story when I said stop. No, and you guys were thinking something else, and all he was doing was farting. Don't tell me my mind was going into the gutter.
It lives there, doesn't it?
But yeah, I just kind of got bit by that bug, and I like the idea of, okay, I can do this job anywhere. Last year I worked for an airline throwing bags, loading and unloading airplanes, and I did it so I could have free travel. But they wanted me to work in the wintertime too, and I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. Sorry, guys.
Oh, wait a minute. That's like hiring a rookie. You mean I have to work weekends? Yeah.
Well, I was seasonal, and when they interviewed me and when they hired me, I said, my happy Irish ass is not going to be out there at 4:00 in the morning when it's 20 degrees below zero out on that tarmac.
Schlepping bags. Yeah.
Ain't going to happen. In the summertime, I'll do it all day long. It was fun.
Funny you should mention that. My wife, when we moved out here, she hasn't worked, for a lot of years now, but she had 28 years in at the police department. And she started working part-time at Starbucks. She's like, I work because I want to, just to get out of the house, not because I have to. And then like anything else, you could see it just over time. Well, hey, can you just do this? Can you do this? Finally, it got down to the point, hey, can you work weekends? And that was it. It was like, no, we're done here. Because it went from working just a little bit and just part-time to, like you were saying, hey, now I can tell you, if somebody wanted to throw me out on a tarmac at 4:00 in the morning, yeah, nah.
No.
Not in Milwaukee either. Come on now, Florida? Yeah, sure. But not Milwaukee.
Yeah, no.
No, man, it gets down to, in the middle of the night like that. It might get down to 50 degrees here.
I don't know how you do it. Brr.
Speaking of nipples, at 50 degrees.
Just got to rub that in a little bit.
Well, so let's talk about that. So you wrote the important stuff. Well, we get that. But so this 2 years out, why did you decide to do this? Why did you decide to pick, hey, I want to start? Because you could have just sat and wrote a book, but you started kind of a community. You want to start kind of a resource, which is what your podcast is. So answer that, then I want to ask you about your podcast.
What happened was I started going to these conferences, and I was just like a normal person there, but people would come up to me, hey, you're that cop guy, right? You're that cop guy. And I'm like, yeah, everybody's going to know. And they're like, hey, I've got this question about this. I got this question about that. And it just kind of mushroomed. It just exploded from there. It just started growing and growing and growing. And it's like, hey, you know what? If you have a police question, ask Pat, yada, yada. And I'm in these communities, and they're like, you know what? You should write a book about this. Then I had some people that are a lot smarter than me that are in the business. And it's like, you'd make a killing.
As a sergeant, that's about 98% of the department, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, pal. You want to throw shit at me, I'll just turn around and throw it right back at you. So
I'm fine with that. That's okay.
No thin skin here.
Hey, but it's funny you mentioned that too, because we're talking about Thriller Fest. That's the annual one they do July in New York. I've seen. I'm going to go to it. This is on my list of things. I'm going to go to it next year, July of 2023. I will be there. But I saw when I've actually. You can download the recordings. You can pay for it. You can get some of the sessions that are recorded. And one of the popular ones too was like the day before they would have some of these classes, and they'd have an ATF guy come in and talk to them just about weapons. This is what they do. This is what they don't do. And by the way, Patrick, one of the things we do on Patreon, by the way, shameless plug, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. When we do our annual monthly Narcometer review, and we rate movies on a scale of 1 to 10 kilos for accuracy, authenticity, and believability, one of the things that always brings movies down is you do the shot count, or you look at the weapon, and it's like, that is one magic revolver, my friend. It fired 12 times without having to reload. Or you've got a semi-automatic that's supposed to be a 13-round clip, and it fires 97 rounds without reloading,
Yeah, there's not a lot of realism in there.
And that's the thing I think hurts most writers too, is they want to write about something And I get it. Look, it's a free country. You can write about anything you want. But if you're going to write like police procedurals or stuff, at least like Michael Connolly did with Harry Bosch, at least he covered the LA crime beat.
Right.
You know, he was talking to those guys all the time. But it's that authenticity they call verisimilitude, right? So when you were teaching these folks, what was some of the biggest misconceptions you saw people have that were trying to write about cop stuff that they didn't understand? That Mr. Ask Pat O'Donnell, not O'Connell, more if I got it right, O'Donnell, the Sarge. What did the Sarge? What kind of things were you teaching them?
Some of the biggest misconceptions were some of the stuff they thought detectives did everything. You know, they thought that, okay, you have a homicide, say, you know, that's what you'd see on TV the most, and there'd be this small football team of detectives that would show up out of nowhere within seconds. And I'm like, no. Cops are, your patrol cops are the first people there. Then a supervisor is either going to beat them or get them around the same time. And I've been to hundreds of homicides, and the thing about it is you might get the detectives there within a half an hour to an hour. The scene is contained. You have also explaining what detectives are. They're investigators. They have a specific job.
Mm-hmm.
And they're usually not getting into car chases or running people down in alleys in the middle of the night. They're doing follow-up. They're doing interviews.
That's what rookies are for. You want to get into a foot chase, get the rookie.
Got that right. But there was a lot of misconceptions as far as that goes. Then as far as when you could arrest somebody or what an arrest was. It's like, okay, I need you to come down to the station, or I'm telling you to come down to the station, or I'm going to take you down to the station. Well, you could say no. Unless you got probable cause to arrest somebody and take away their freedom, they don't have to do that.
Right.
And see, Pat, right there, that's another thing too. I've always got to tell people. They said, "Well, you didn't have probable cause to pull me over." I don't need probable cause. I need reasonable suspicion. I need PC to arrest.
And there's a lot of there was a lot of confusion with that. And don't leave town. I can't tell you not to leave town.
I love that in the old movies. Don't leave town without
People
notifying
still
us.
think that. I'm like, no. And then as far as shootings go, there's a lot of misconceptions with guns. You were talking about like ATF. You have a lot of writers that have never even held a gun before. They don't, they just see, the hysteria on TV or the news or something where somebody's shooting a pistol and it's like flying out of their hands or whatever,
Or you shoot them with a 38 and it knocks the guy back 47 feet.
Most people crumble when they get shot. They don't go flying, they crumble, and it depends on, obviously what kind of bullet, what the range is, what the trajectory is. We had a friend of mine that gets shot in the foot with an AK-47 at a traffic stop. They pull over a car that was fleeing. Guy comes out of the driver's side, just starts popping rounds off, blows part of his foot off. This poor copper. His partner chases down the bad guy, shoots him in the head with Smith & Wesson 40 cal and M&P, and it bounces off the bad guy's skull. I mean, knocked him unconscious, but it didn't penetrate his skull.
And it didn't come in that's the other thing too. A lot of people, if it doesn't come in at the right angle, I mean, depending on where you hit, sometimes those skulls are hard. It's not that the round wasn't strong enough. It's just at the angle it came in at.
I mean, I can tell you a story. I had a busy night in the hood. I'm by myself. They're like, start going to the shooting. And I'm like, all right. So I go and I'm like, screw it. I'll just, I'm not waiting for anybody. So I go, I walk up, I'm all being tactical. I got my gun out. And there's a guy sitting on the stoop where the shooting was supposed to be. And I look at him and I'm like, let me see your hands. He's totally cooperative. And he's like, you might want this. And I'm like, what? He said, this is the bullet. I'm like, huh? He got shot between the eyes. The bullet traveled between the skull and the skin and popped out the crown of his head.
When you said that this popped into, you remember those stories. I was a little rookie in Salina, Kansas, working District 1, 901. And we get called to a shooting one night. Guy named Stevie Thomas. and he's laying out there. I had just gone through EMT training. I'm a brand new EMT in addition to being a cop, and he's laying there, and EMS gets there about the same time. And so they start hooking him up, and he was shot. We know he's shot. We see like an entrance wound. So they hook him up. They've got the defibrillator out, so they put the leads on him and they hook him up. They say it's a flatline, start CPR. So I start doing CPR. Well, they had it hooked to paddles, not leads. So I'm doing CPR on a live guy. So let me tell you, when you do CPR on a live guy, the arms come up. He comes to life pretty quick. Well, they take him to the hospital, and you know where they found his round? He got shot with the 25. It did the same thing. It hit a rib and stayed under the skin and came all the way to the other side. Oh, was that the bullshit meter going off? Because it usually doesn't go off that late into our podcast. That's the dog. The dog's going, that's bullshit. But yeah, it traveled all the way around his back and was lodged on the other side. Yeah. And the surgeon just basically made a little nick and pulled out the round.
I remember I had a shooting where this is towards the end of my career. You get sent to the hospital for a gunshot victim. This guy was shot, I think, 7 or 8 times, and it hit nothing vital. He's just laying there. He was like a 20-year-old kid. He was in the hood buying dope. And of course, he had this big story of, I was just minding my own business and I got shot 7 times. It's like, no, you weren't. But I mean, it was literally, here's your Snoopy Band-Aids and out the door you go like an hour later. And then you go to the other shooting where they're shot 1 time and they're deader than Elvis before they hit the ground. There's no rhyme or reason sometimes. It just happens.
What are you doing to that dog?
Frankie.
You better feed that thing. If it starts gnawing on you, pal, I don't know where to send help.
Somewhere in Boston.
There was a picture one time, and this was quite a few years ago, but it was of a Marine that he had freaked out mentally, had flipped or something happened. He got a hold of something bad, but they had shot him like 8, 9, 10 times with the .40 caliber, and the dude was still coming at him. And then you turn, and so you see it's like, I mean, they were hitting vital stuff. Then you turn around and you look at, now somebody takes out a .22. Actually, it was a guy I went through DEA training with. Guy named Tony Patterson, Topeka PD. He got killed during the service of a search warrant because they knocked on the door. The guy saying he didn't hear him say police. Everybody said they said police. They knocked on the door. He thought he was being raided. Anyway, he shot through the door 1 time with the .22. That .22 went right above his vest, underneath his armpit, and killed him.
Yeah. When it's your time to go, it's sad,
but it does happen. There's no doubt about it.
Well, let's get off this morbid stuff and let's talk about something a little bit less morbid, which is...
Well, I want to ask you, before we move on to the next thing, I want to ask you, so have you been able to convert this into a monetary
Well, I wrote 2 books called Cops and Writers under my own name, and those sell fairly well. Mm-hmm. And then I just got picked up by a publisher to write fiction. And the name of the series is called Brew City Blues. It's kind of a homage to Hill Street Blues. And it's kind of a cop opera, it's kind of a cop soap opera where you have one main character that's loosely based on me. And the first book in the series is field training. Second book is probation. Third book is choir practice. So it kind of takes the reader through what he's been going through. And, he's at District 5 in Milwaukee on late shift, and like the shooting that I was telling you in the tavern, that's in there. That different stuff. And, and I added some stuff to give it a little more flavor that didn't happen to me, but.
You mean like a sergeant who actually takes calls and writes reports?
Ouch.
That's fiction. There's fiction right there for
recon. You. How do you know that much about me? Jeez.
I just know the rank.
The hardest working individuals, let me tell you.
Well, let me tell you the other thing too. I always used to make the lieutenants pissed off because I'd look at them and I'd bypass them and go to the captain. They go, "Don't you know the chain of command?" I said, "Obviously, sir, you don't know the history. Lieutenant is actually a term that stands for in lieu of. In lieu of the captain was here. I just went directly to the captain. That's not the way it works." Sorry, you can't fight history, sir. I'm sorry. That's the way it was written.
But I know that I'd called you about a former police officer that's over in Micronesia that's a friend of ours that's looking to write a book, and he's looking for guidance. And I called Pat. It took 2 seconds for him to say, "Give me my number, give me my email address, let's talk." I don't think he's contacted you yet, but
yes,
he is on the other side of the world. Yeah,
Micronesia.
Yeah, that's part of the Lost Clipper thing.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, is he over there for that?
He's the guy who was the Hawaiian police officer that when the U.S. decided to impose the rule of law in Micronesia, they asked for volunteers from Hawaiian police departments, and he volunteered for a 1 or 2 year assignment and ended up marrying a local chieftain's daughter. And
that could be a book, really.
Stayed. Oh, he's phenomenal. He's a super guy. You'd love him. I mean, he's cop through
Here's
and through.
another popular misconception, because look at that. The dog brought you a ball.
Frankie.
Beware of strangers bearing gifts. Yeah.
Shame our listeners can't see this. That's kind of cute.
I got somebody reached out to us, Murph. But here's another misconception too. Hawaii Five-0 does really not exist. There is no such thing as a state police organization in Hawaii. Why?
What?
Because yeah. So when they did Hawaii Five-0 with the real Steve McGarrett, Jack Lord and stuff. So I had somebody say one time, I was a part of the real Hawaii Five-0. I said, there was no 5-0. There's only 49 state police, or state criminal investigative agencies. Hawaii does not have one. I said, name it. What's it called? So that was one of the other ones that was kind of a misconception. They'd watch Hawaii Five-0 and think, oh, there really is a state police organization. No.
No, good stuff. But I love the fact that you're doing this, because, Pat and I have had this conversation before when we were talking about Bill. Javier and I get calls all the time from people, primarily police officers. Hey, I'm thinking about writing a book. Can I pick your brain? Well, that takes about 20 seconds because we did ours ass backwards. They did the Marcos series and then we wrote a book. And I tried writing it. I sat down for like 6 hours one day and just wrote my little butt off, waited till the next morning and read, and I thought, what a crock. It was horrible.
Well, I cut my teeth on the other books before I wrote those books. So it wasn't flying blind, and it wasn't my first, rodeo.
Well, Steve's first chapter was See Pablo run. Steve chased Pablo. Good Steve.
Run, Pablo, run.
Pablo not running.
Shoot, Steve,
shock
shoot.
or spoiler alert, Pablo's dead. He's room temperature.
Crap pants,
By the way,
Steve,
December
pants.
of 93, strangely around the same time as Dahmer, when he was convicted, I think. Yeah. Convicted, and then he was killed a year later. So anyway, I digress. First true digression. So we have a drinking game. If I digress or say back to our regularly scheduled podcast, you get to take a drink. Hey, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you talk about drinking with Pat, you watch it because he's, first generation immigrant from Ireland. So mom and dad came over.
So let me talk. I'll tell you one of my favorite songs. Wherever you go around the world, you find an Irish pub. Have you heard that one? It's by the Irish Kings. I was just go to
true.
YouTube. Yeah, it's like there's one in Honolulu, there's one in Moscow too, 4 of them in Sydney, and a couple in Kathmandu. Cool. So whether you sing or pull a pint, you'll always have a job, because wherever you go around the world, you'll find an Irish pub, which is pretty much true.
It is true. Thank goodness.
Absolutely.
Let's go back, as they say. Let's go back a wee bit there, lad, and talk about. Let's talk about the cops and writers. So, as you're doing your last 2 years of getting out of this thing and thinking about writing full time, what does that change for you in terms of your thinking about? Is it a hobby? Are you treating it like a hobby? Or are you looking now this has got to be a way of life? I mean, how do you turn it from a hobby into something like Steve was saying? How do you monetize it?
It's interesting you say that, because it was a hobby at first. But I had a buddy that was working on his PhD, another sergeant, that wrote this post-apocalyptic book. He threw it up on Amazon, and he made like $10,000 in 1 year on it. And I'm just like, holy cow, people make money. Then I went to the first 20 books to 50K Facebook groups conference in Vegas. It's mostly independent authors that go to that. There's hybrid and there's published too. And I'm just having beers with a guy whose wife went and got her PhD. She was going to be a professor at Penn State. She was on track for that. She started writing medieval Scottish romance. And he showed me how much money she was making. And I'm like, holy shit. It's more than she would be making as a professor. So she stopped all the professor stuff, and she's a full-time writer now. So I was thinking to myself, that stuck in my head. I'm like, people can make money doing this. You have to be smart about it. You have to have a good work ethic. That's the thing. It's like, I'm retired. My wife's laughing at me. She said, you're working harder now that you're retired than you were before you were retired. Yeah, like I said, day shift sergeant in a police department is the best job.
Well, Pat was working on. He wanted to make sure he wasn't working on wife number 3, and he realized when he started delegating all of his stuff to his wife, it didn't work that way anymore. Honey, you're retired. Fucking do it yourself.
Yeah, I'm not trying for a three-peat. No. One divorce is more than enough. Thank you very much.
Whereas a buddy of mine
Yes,
who
it
was, I
is.
think, working on was on his 5th
Oof.
wife. He never introduced her by name. He said, "I'm introducing you to the future plaintiff number 5." You know, which did not make her happy either.
I don't think that would.
I wonder if he's ever going to listen to what he says. That might be a clue right
You
there.
know, Ben, we don't listen to,
Clues.
we're tone
you
deaf
could be
a
a
lot.
detective
Yeah.
or an investigator. You know about clues.
Clues, yes. So, but talk about that. So you started looking at watching the money be made. So, what'd you do?
I started a website. I started a Facebook group. And my Facebook groups, when I first started, it was me, my editor, and a couple of friends. And it blew up pretty good. I've got, 5,600 people in there right now. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be a consultant. I'm going to help people write their books. Well, what I discovered, and some people, again, that are much smarter than me that are in the business, they're like, that's very time consuming. You're going to have to charge a lot of money. And I'm like, okay. But then I'm thinking to myself, a lot of people that are asking these questions are newer authors that don't have a lot of money. And I don't want to gouge these people, so.
Not yet anyway. Wait till they get rich and then say, you owe me 10%. I'm your agent.
So that didn't go so great. It's like the last 2 books, they sold decently, they were Amazon bestsellers, which, I'll take it, but, not New York Times or USA Today or anything like that. But
not yet.
Exactly. And then the podcast kind of feeds into that. So I got the website, the podcast, the Facebook group, and I was approached by somebody to go into this series, what I was talking about before, writing this fiction. So hopefully that will make some money, and we'll see where it goes.
It's amazing how many cops are writing books right now, or former cops. I mean, we had Sherry Foster on our show, who was a former GBI and retired DEA agent. In fact, Morgan, Connie and I had dinner with her a couple nights ago. She's in town. And her book is now at the editor.
And you know why it is, Murph? Because we got on her ass, TikTok, the time. And then I got on her ass because she introduced me to the editor she's using, the one I was telling you about before we went on there, Patrick. I actually got farther faster with him than she did. And so I was rubbing her nose in it and going, hey, I'm almost done. Here I am. I'm writing, because I would write. Once you get started writing, as you probably guys see, my writing and my verbal skills, I can talk a lot, I can write a lot. So I was writing 2,000 words a day.
Yeah, that's decent. When were you doing it? Like right away in the morning when you woke up, or?
No, for me, it was one of those things. I'd have to think about it for a while. I started doing a little. My routine was I've kind of took a hybrid of stuff. I know some people say they get up in the early in the morning when there's no distractions and do stuff. My mind doesn't work that way. So one of my routines I always did is in the morning, I only read business books. So I read for like 30 minutes. I have a set of routines I got to start my day with because I'm OCD and ADD and all that other good stuff. By the way, do you know what CDO is?
We didn't know that.
Yeah, but do you guys know what CDO is?
CDO, that's somebody's obsessive compulsive. Put it in
it's OCD.
Order.
Yes, that's CDO is OCD in order. But so at night, what I do is I read fiction. So I'm like, right now I'm reading the Gray Man series on book number 7 of Mark Greaney, but I read all the David Baldacci. I've read a bunch of stuff. And then during the day, I get these ideas. So I put them down into a book. And I mean, actually, I have it right here. So what I do is I take this book and I say, I already kind of have an outline for the chapter, but I say, okay, here's what I want to do in this next chapter. And then I write it kind of during the day. Here's what I want to do. Then I sit down like maybe 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I can just crank it out. I can crank out 2,000 words in maybe an hour and 45 minutes.
Oh wow, that's really good.
So how much is 2,000 words? Is that like 3 pages?
Probably about 6 or 7.
What's 2,000 words?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a chapter. Yeah. I was trying to write a chapter a day is what I was trying to do. And figuring that you write 2,000 words and you're going to have to edit that. Stephen King, his book, seminal book called On Writing Memoirs of the Craft, his formula is a second draft equals first draft minus 10%. So you always, you write more than what you need because I know I'll save a lot of this and take it into the next book. I'm at 173,000 words and I need to target first book should be maybe 100,000, but you can get by with 120. So I got to cut out 50,000 words, which means a lot of this is going to go into the second book.
Tom Patterson, his big thing was, every paragraph should be staccato and no more than like 1,100-1,200 words. Just, keep that pace going. Just keep it going. James Patterson, excuse me.
As our regular listeners know, once Morgan starts talking, if he writes as much as he talks, he can knock out like 80,000 words, in probably 45 minutes.
Yeah. And eventually somebody's going to buy this, and I'll be sitting on a beach going, "Fuck you, Murph," while you're schlepping it, trying to go talk somewhere. I'm going to be getting one of my fancy drinks sent to me, wearing my Tommy Bahama. Thank you, Marlon Carlson.
You're sitting in Ashburn, Virginia, saying that anyway. Every time we get together.
I know. Hey, well, let's kind of, we've kind of come kind of full circle, but let's talk about where things are going. Let's talk about this book series. So how far are you into it? When can we expect to see the first book?
The first book is on pre-order. That launches November 19th.
And where do we find this at?
Amazon. It's going to be Amazon exclusive.
And can they get to it through your site? Is it copsandwriters.com?
Yeah, I don't have that up yet. Just go to Amazon.
Okay. Actually, and what do they search for?
Brew City Blues.
BREW, Brew City Blues.
And November 18th, the first book goes live. The second book goes live December 30th. The third book goes live February 15th or 16th, somewhere in that ballpark.
So let's talk about your process. No, Steve, he's got it's 20 books, I think you said, right?
Oh, yeah. No. I'm probably going to, we'll see where this goes, if people buy it or not. That's the number one, so at least 3, maybe 6, maybe more.
How long did it take you to write 3 books?
I wrote the first book in about a month and a half, a little over a month. So I write every day and write.
See, that's the secret right there. You got to write every day.
I write every day. And like yesterday, I got the edits back for the first book, from the editor. And there's a lot of going back and forth with that. So that's chewing up a lot of my writing time. I did that for 6 hours yesterday. And it's tedious and it's monotonous and just that part sucks. That's the part where you start hating your book. You don't want to see it anymore. You're like, oh, get this thing away from me. But it's nice when it's all finished.
Well, that's the editor I'm working with. And I was talking with him, said, "How do I know when I'm done?" He says, "You'll know when you're done when you're sick. You can't look at it again. It's like you're done." And so, it takes a while to read 173,000 words. So I read the first pass now that I've got everything in context, because I started the first part of the book well before I finished it. But now I'm on a clip, but then the second pass is start looking for, I got to start cutting words, and I'm finding the obvious errors. And he was saying it'll probably, with your first book, probably take you 5 or 6 passes until you've done everything you can. And when you've done everything you can, that's when you send it to me. Because then that time it's no longer your book anymore, is what he was saying. It's kind of like it's my book. But he had a great saying, though. He said, "Look, I can fix a bad page. I just can't fix a blank page."
That's true.
If you guys are thinking about writing, just like one author said, vomit, then clean up. That was his approach. Just throw up on the page, clean it up later. But if you don't get it on the page, there's nothing to edit. You don't got to worry about it.
That's very, very true. But mine, I think we're going to be between 70 to 80,000 words per book.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, you talked a little bit. Let's talk about your protagonist, which is inside the beltway, or inside baseball terms, for who's the hero of the story. Who's your main protagonist?
His name is Michael Collins. Surprisingly Irish. I know that.
Yeah. Surprisingly, why is it not Michael Dollins? See, Michael Collins. Okay, surprisingly Irish.
Michael Collins is the protagonist. He has some personal tragedies that he has to deal with. He was in the Army, and he's starting fresh and new in Milwaukee as a police officer.
Why did he pick Milwaukee?
I believe it was he has roots here in Milwaukee. His folks live in Chicago. My folks live in Chicago. Spoiler alert. And he lived in Milwaukee before he went off to join the Army.
So if you were looking at the protagonist of your character, how I mean, everybody still writes with a little bit of themselves in it. How close do you resemble him, or does he resemble you? 10%, 20, 30, you think?
Oh, probably more than that. Probably 60, 70%. I was never in the Army, but my son was, so I always picked his brain. And you know what it's like, if you're in any kind of police organization, you're surrounded by veterans. So, you're with them 24/7. It feels like, it's like you start to pick up on the lingo, the mannerisms. And like my son was in the Army for 5 years. He did one tour in Iraq. He was a cavalry scout. So,
There's a fun job.
yeah. So, obviously I could pick his brain, and I pick up on the culture and stuff like that from all the people that I've worked with.
So, and where did you get the idea for it? I mean, was it something that had been brewing for a while, or in terms of the character and the way you wanted to approach this, where did it come from?
I had two characters in my head for two distinct different books, and I'm collaborating with somebody, and I told him both of them. He said, "Oh, this one for sure." And I'm like, "Okay." And that's the great part about a collaboration, where I have an actual sounding board, where most writers, it's you and your keyboard, and that's it.
Because I'm interested too. We talked a little bit about this beforehand, but what's your process? I mean, what is your for folks who are thinking about getting into writing, and if they want to write, I mean, whether it's cop stuff or related stuff, but what are a couple of the lessons you can give people when you start thinking, hey, if you want to get into writing, here's three or four tips that are, it's like, who do you read? I've read a lot of Stephen Pressfield, obviously read Stephen King, done some of the master classes, David Baldacci, James Patterson, Dan Brown. And I pick and choose from those things. But if you're going to, as you work with people or you're giving advice like at these conferences, what are some of the things you've learned? What are Pat's lessons over the years? Kind of like you did from divorce. What are Pat's lessons for writers so you don't end up being divorced and in the poorhouse?
All right. Everybody, I forget the statistic, but it was like 80 or 90% of people in the general population say they have a book in them. They have a story that they want to tell. That's great. That's fabulous. Most people never hit the publish button. Most people never do it. If you're going to think about being a writer, you have to think to yourself, what do you want out of this? Is this a hobby? I helped a friend of a friend that went through Marine Corps boot camp during Vietnam. And he wanted to write a book about it, not to make a bunch of money or sell a bunch, just to kind of memorialize it for his kids and his grandkids and his grandkids' kids. They could see what grandpa did in Vietnam, and it started in boot camp. And he didn't spend a lot of money on a cover or anything like that, but I helped him get it up on Kindle. Now it's there forever. So you have to ask yourself, what do I want out of this? Okay. Do I want to make a lot of money? Do I want to quit my day job? Okay. First off, don't burn the boats. Don't quit your day job right away. People, they have this very glamorous idea of what writing is, and it's a very tough business, and it's hard to make money. But if you do it smartly and you have purpose and you have a very good work ethic and maybe a little bit of luck, yeah, you can make some money doing this. But start with the basics. Okay, first ask yourself, it's like, what do I want out of this? Do I want to be the next James Patterson, or is this a hobby? Okay, I want to be the next James Patterson. Okay, you're going to work 7 days a week. It works best if you have a specific time of day that you write. A lot of people get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I interviewed a guy that is an appellate court judge in Illinois. He gets up at 3:30, 4 o'clock every morning before he goes into work and is a judge. But it's working for him because he collaborates with James Patterson. David Ellis is his name. He's a great writer. Secondly, read what you want to write. Read that genre. If you want to write mysteries, you better start reading some mysteries and start picking up on the tropes. Okay, what happens? What are like the main tropes in a suspense, or romance? Okay, romance, there better be a happily ever after, or else nobody's going to read your book, the second book. There's certain tropes that you have to hit. That doesn't mean you're copying everybody, but if you want to be this unique snowflake in this genre, it's not going to work. Or at least your chances aren't as good. And then start with the basics. When people are scrolling, a lot of people just scroll on their phones or on the computer, and they're looking at a little thumbnail of your book cover. It better be good. They will judge your book by its cover, and it should meet genre expectations. If you have a like an espionage book or whatever, a lot of them, there's like a silhouette of a person with a gun.
Oh, like holding a gun. Absolutely. It's kind of like the James Bond 007 thing.
Exactly. So if you don't have something like that, and if I can't see after 1 or 2 seconds what this book is about by looking at the cover, I'm just going to keep scrolling.
Yeah, if you got a picture of Fabio on the front cover, it's probably not going to sell well in the thriller section.
You never know. Maybe Fabio's got a second
maybe
job,
in Milwaukee, but I don't know about you.
Fabio, you're old. Jeez.
Oh, you were saying romance. Guess whose picture basically was used on a lot of those romance ones?
Fabio.
Yeah,
all the Harlequin stuff. That's right.
Yeah.
Second is where people's eyes go to is the blurb, the book description. It's very important that first off, you get a hook. It's like, okay, Morgan is in a life and death chase to, get the codes for the atomic bomb that's about to go off, or
and
whatever.
his partner Murph, instead of calling 911, called 199, and the world blew up. Thanks, Murph.
There you go. I'm here for you.
So,
Steve, call 911. What was that again? Slow down. I got to write this down.
So try to get the hook and have it, have that hook at first, and then a brief description. But don't write the book in the book description. That's where a lot of people falter, a lot of writers. It should be, it's like, okay, this person has done X, Y, and Z. Give the reader a reason to be interested in this book.
It's kind of like a trailer for a movie. You don't want to put the whole movie in the trailer. You want a trailer that like the blurb is, here's your 2 or 3 sentences that tells you what it is. Now the trailers, gives you a better flavor of what it is. But they cut it in such a way to create so many questions. The only way to answer them is you got to watch the movie.
And at the end, state a question. Is Morgan going to save the world on time? Is his partner going to be asleep?
Not if it depends on Murph calling 911.
199. Here we go.
So have your blurb squared away. That's very important. And then with Kindle books, they have that look inside feature where you just hit in. You know what? Your first chapter should draw the person in. If they get that far into your book, or okay, they looked at the cover. Hey, I like this guy's cover. Okay, the blurb, the book description's good. All right, now I'm going to hit that button there, and I'm really close to buying. If it's my cat is asleep on my computer, and the world is just fine, nobody's going to buy that book.
No.
So
right.
you got to have a compelling draw into it, right away. So that's the secret sauce. That's get the basic stuff down first to hook that reader. And we're talking about series. There's a lot of whale readers out there that read like a book a day sometimes.
Boy,
I don't know how they do it. I don't have the bandwidth, but those are the ones that they won't even buy a book until there's like 3 books in a series, because they know that they can just keep on consuming it. And reviews, there's mixed thoughts on reviews. Some people count it's like, oh yeah, that guy's got like 14,000 reviews. That's great. That person there has 10 reviews. Not so great. But it's very subjective, but it's social proof that the book is decent. So getting those reviews and getting it, and the way you line that up is you have to ask people. If you're new and you're starting, you have to ask them. It's like, hey, here's an advanced reader copy of my book. I would appreciate an honest review.
Honest review, yeah.
Right. And if you don't ask, most of the time it doesn't happen. So that's really important. So those are the basics that I would tell a new writer, but it has to start with, what do you want out of this?
What's your goal? And when he said, my editor asked me, I learned this lesson a long time ago. So I didn't say, it wasn't, I want to write a book. I said, I want to be published. That was my goal. There's a difference between writing a book and being published. Anybody can write a book, but to go through, like you say, all the iterations, the draft reviews, the edits, the bleeding. Like one guy say, writing is very easy. You just open up a vein and bleed all over the page.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's not easy, but that's the reason why there's a lot of people who want to write, but very few who actually not only write a book and actually type the end, at the end of the book, but actually get it published. So,
well, you'd be surprised by all the people that I know that have written the book. They have a cover, they got the blurb, and they're frozen like deer in a headlight. They won't hit that publish button. They're scared to
what
death.
are they, just imposter syndrome? They just don't think they're supposed to be a published author, or what?
I think it's part of that, and it's, you know what, when you hit that publish button, you put yourself out there. Unless you're using a pen name, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of trolls, all kinds of BS that
You
can
open
come
the
through it.
kimono, unzip the fly. We can come up with all sorts of
Yes.
analogies. But yeah, that's the whole point. Is you really do expose yourself out there. Now, that I want to ask a question because we're going to have to wrap this up. But you said that you were writing one under your name. Have you decided on a pen name, or obviously you have if you're going to write under one?
I've written under 2 pen names before, but the latest books are going to be under my name, and the Cops and Writers books are under my name.
Now, why did you use pen names for the other books?
The first one, the car sales one, was, like I said, it's a glorified PDF. And being in law enforcement, any kind of outside employment, you have to have approval from the chief of police.
Oh.
So I used a pen name because I didn't want to go through that BS.
Well, and it's not like you made a ton of money and retired off of that PDF, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
I wouldn't call that outside employment. It's not like having a job. I lost money on this thing. I didn't make money.
But you know how it goes, where it's like, okay, Pat did X, Y, or Z. It's not that bad. It's not that egregious. But man, he has outside employment, and he didn't notify us. He didn't go through the chain of command. You're supposed to write this, memo to your captain, and the captain has to forward up the chain to the chief. And the chief is the only person that can say yay or nay to that outside employment.
Well, now we've learned something about not the real Patrick O'Connell, because he's writing under the name Patrick O'Donnell. Hey, see, I was trying to give you a pen name right from the start, man. I was trying to help you disguise who you really were.
No one would ever figure that out either. Nobody.
Well, just make it Sean.
Sean. Well, that's like Batman. Or Superman. All he had to do was take off a pair of glasses, and all of a sudden he's Superman. It's like,
that's true.
Oh, please, really? One pair of glasses and everybody's flummoxed. Nobody can figure out who the dude is.
It's amazing. It's totally cool.
I like him. Well, hey, let's bring this to a close. Let's finish off by shamelessly pimping you out and giving you a gratuitous shout out. So tell us, where can people find you? Where can they find your stuff? And how can they get a hold of you? Just give us the whole blurb. Just vomit on us. Go.
All right. I've got the Facebook group is Cops and Writers. My website is Cops and Writers. My podcast is Cops and Writers. You see, there's a pattern for me. You guys are like ex-cops. You know how this works.
Give me one more, and I may be able to detect a pattern.
And if you want to email me, Sarge at copsandwriters.com.
There you go, Sarge at copsandwriters.com. Wow.
Hey, and listening to his podcast, he has some really, really interesting guests. Not just because we were on there, but I looked at some of the other people we have on there. You've got some great.
Thank you very much for that, Steve. But now Morgan's got to come on the show.
Well, dude, if I do, I'm just going to blow up your numbers. I don't know if I should, do that yet until I'm ready. So,
yeah, right. Talk about vomiting. I think I am right here.
Oh, yeah. This is. Well, no, hey guys, we kind of took a different tour this time because this was. It had some good stories in there, and I didn't realize we were going to get that close to Dahmer, and that's what made me think. Yeah, with Tim Stommel. That's where he was for 3 years beforehand. So it's obviously a very small world. But hey, look. This is interesting because obviously that's something I'm involved with right now. I've got some deadlines for me to hit because I need to start on my next book in December. So I've got to start working on my outline, but I've got to get this draft and, everything finalized into the editor. So Sherry, TikTok, it's, I've got the same clock ticking now. But hey, first of all, though, hey, man, it was great. We had before Murph got on, you got on early, we had a good 20 minutes. We're just going back and forth talking about the craft and writing and just impressive stuff, man. Good stuff. And kudos to you for being able to take your law enforcement career and transition into something like this where you are still helping people. You still haven't given it up. You're still helping people.
Thank you very much.
Good stuff.
Hey, but hold on
Good
though, because
stuff.
you get to hang with us as we do the outro. Because see, now
Ooh.
we're doing this all together.
All right.
Because I forgot to ask you though in the beginning. So, folks, pretend we're way at the beginning. I forgot to ask you: are you ready to play the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the game of crimes, Patrick O'Donnell?
Yes.
Okay, see, now I will cut that into the beginning and now we'll do the outro. So, hey, hope you guys enjoyed this little episode. If you do, go to that thing they call Apple Podcast and Spotify. Hit those 5 stars, whether it's in Japanese, Farsi, German, Einstein, drei, vier, fits, is it? Something like that. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco. Murph knows a little bit of Espanol there. Just go hit those 5 stars. Count the 5. That's the number of stars you give us. Head on over to gameofcrimespodcast.com for more info about the show. We're definitely going to be linking to Patrick O'Donnell, his real name, not his nom de guerre, which is Patrick O'Connell. We don't want to confuse everybody. So Patrick O'Donnell, we'll be linking to all of his stuff over there. So go to gameofcrimespodcast.com. Follow us on that thing they call the social media on the interwebs, at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Head on over to paypal.com. Just use our email, gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com or paypal.me. Hey, I know Steve knows the answer to this, but let me ask you, Patrick, where do you have to be? Where do you have to be? Where do you have to be? You have to be on Patreon, right?
Yes, you do.
See, even Patrick O'Donnell, the writer of Cops and Writers, knows you have to be on there. So yeah, head on over to patreon.com/Game of Crimes. Do all that fun stuff with us. And, just hang tight with us because we love your guys' input. We love the fact that you guys hang out with us. And right, Murph, we were at that time of place. So what do we tell people? We say we thank them. And what else do you got to say? Anything?
No, I'm sorry. My wife just came in and gave me I think we're getting ready to lose power. Yeah, so if I disappear, but thank you guys very much. Pat, it's been a true honor to have you here on the show. We got to say this real quick.
If Murph disappears, that sounds a little more ominous.
Are you at the tent? Is the generator on? Or what's going on here? Is there a solar flare? Or is there an EMP?
It's a beautiful afternoon.
I think the mower's about to cut through your power line. But hey, look, guys, no, but this is good stuff. We'll put all this online. But we want to thank you guys once again for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, and cop-friendly, writer-friendly. Patrick O'Donnell, new book series coming out. You got to go check it out at copsandwriters.com. Podcast, Game of Crimes.